The Bad Day. Written by Jim Gibson, Shaun and Matthew Elliott. Original draft, including Liam Kavanagh. Chapter 1. Darren Alcock has just finished work. His day didn't go to plan, and for reasons only known to himself, he finds himself walking into the local pub. He approaches the bar and greets the bartender with a stern look on his face, and demands a pint of lager in an aggressive tone. The bartender, who had been in conversation with his wife when Darren had entered, now looked miffed as his wife walked off, and turned to Darren and asked him, "Pint of lager, was it?" Darren rounded on him, pointing out to the bartender that if he hadn't been stood around talking, he would have heard him the first time. This aggravated the bartender, who then answered, "Look, if you're going to come in here and start getting aggressive, you can just bugger off now, as I am not in the mood to deal with this today." This comment, which angered Darren more. "You're not in the mood, mate, it's your job. If you're not happy in here, then get a different job." The bartender looked on in disgust as Darren turns his back on him and reveals his mobile phone, and tries to contact one of his friends, and when his friend's voicemail answers, Darren's anger rises. "For fuck's sake!" he shouts out as another customer enters. "I wouldn't order a pint if I were you, mate, unless you don't mind waiting all night." The man, clearly at a loss of a response, turns to his son and tells him to go sit down as he approaches the bar. The bartender looks relieved to turn his attention to his new customer instead of Darren, who is now planning his next move, and muttering to himself, he walks over to the games machine, enters his money and loses it just as quick. Darren, who clearly doesn't want to be there anymore, drinks the remaining alcohol from his pint glass, slams it down on the table and kicks the machine as he walks away from it. The man, who had just entered with his son, looks nervous as his phone starts ringing, and with a look to his son, which means he won't be a moment, leaves the bar to answer the call. "Another pint," Darren orders to the bartender. "Think you've had enough, lad, I want you out," the bartender says calmly. Darren snorts, and makes a gesture that he has better places to be, makes a rude gesture to the bartender, and as he walks out says single quote, "The pub is a shithole anyway." As Darren walks outside, he sees the man on the phone, and as he overhears the words, "Of course, I love you," he snorts, and when the man looks at him, Darren says loudly, "Enjoy it while it lasts." The man, who had been quiet and reserved up to this point, loses his temper and shouts, Watch what you saying, don't get involved in things that have nothing to do with you." Darren is taken aback, but retaliates, and shouts out, "Someone is touchy," and walks on, leaving the man angry and aggravated. A woman, who had been walking past the pub's car park, looked over and upon hearing the two men argue, had shook her head and muttered, "Dickheads." Darren walks to his van and passes the homeless man, and when he passes he kicks his money pot and says, "Get a job, you worthless scrounger. Wish I could make a living off riding the coattails of better people," and proceeds to his van. Darren, angry, and under the influence, leaves the car park. Chapter 2. Colin and Joe Parker. Colin Parker was feeling a little uneasy. He had good reason to be. He had called in sick at work so he could take his son, Joe, to watch the football at Mansfield Town. The match had not gone to plan, and Mansfield had lost. "They should have won, Dad," Joe tells his father on the way to the pub. Colin thought he would stop off at his local for a pick-me-up. Colin and Joe entered the pub and were met by an angry man, who shouted to Colin he wouldn't order a pint if I were you, mate, unless you don't mind waiting all night, and then walked off. Colin looked at the man and wondered if it had been safe to come here. He told Joe to find a seat to get him safely away from the bar in case this man became more aggressive. Colin orders a pint and a Pepsi for his son, and asked the bartender how his day was, and the bartender looked over to see the angry man had started playing on the games machine, and said, "It's been better, not the best day I've had." At this point, Colin's mobile rings, and he freezes. He wonders if his boss or workmates had seen him out and about, but when he looks, he sees it's his wife. He glances at Joe, and gives him a gesture to show it's Joe's mother, and Joe seems to understand. Colin leaves the pub, and answers the call. "Hello, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" he asks his wife, and the response worries him somewhat. He asks if she wants him to come home. To reassure him, she says no, but tells him she's going to go to the doctor, as she's still not feeling better, and when he offers to take her, she tells him to spend some time with Joe, and that she will walk. "You shouldn't worry so much," she tells him, "but I do appreciate everything you do," she adds. At this point, the angry man leaves the pub, and overhears their conversation as Colin reassures his wife, saying, "Of course, I love you." And as his conversation with his wife ends, the man snorts at Colin, and says enjoy it while it lasts, which angers Colin, as his wife is ill, and these insensitive words make him worry, as depending on how her illness goes, it could be fatal for all this man knows. Watch what you saying, and don't get involved in things that have nothing to do with you. He sneers at the angry man. The man turns to him and says, "Ow, someone's touchy." Colin watches the angry man walk away, and steals a glance at the woman walking past the car park. Then, his temper raised, walks back into the pub to be with his son. Chapter 3. Old Man Clifford. To many, Old Man Clifford had been a member of society for the last few years, a tramp who was known to lie in the most desolate spots of town, and would be the victim of verbal, and even sometimes physical abuse. Today was no different. He woke in the same spot he had occupied for the last few days, and wiped his nose on the sleeve of his filthy jumper. Old Man Clifford had a secret. He had once been a successful businessman and entrepreneur, who had lived a high life, had 4 cars, and a mansion in the countryside. But one day, a terrible error had occurred, and Clifford had lost it all. Clifford's new spot was outside a pub on the outskirts of town, and had decided to stay, as it seemed to be a place where many people would leave the pub in drunken jolliness and had been more than willing to spare some change. On this day, a man in a van had sped into the car park, and Clifford watched as he entered the pub. He had never understood the concept of alcohol curing life's troubles, but wondered if he would be willing to donate some change if his problems were cured. A little later on, he witnessed another car enter the car park, and a man and a young boy got out, and Clifford assumed they had been to watch football, as they were wearing scarves, and Clifford recognized the emblem as Mansfield Town Football Club. Clifford himself had slept outside their stadium before. The man, who saw Clifford, walked over and dropped money in his pot, and told him to have a good day. "Thank you, kind sire," Clifford said, with a kind glint in his eye. The man smiled and led the young boy into the pub. Later on, the man walked outside of the pub and answered his phone, and Clifford was sad to see that he looked anxious and worried, but it was not his place to ask if he was okay. The angry man soon followed, and Clifford saw the two men argue, and then eventually, the man who had given him money shouted to the angry man to keep his nose out of his business. The angry man then walked over to him and kicked his money pot over, and then left. Clifford collected his coins up, and saw the man with the son walk back inside the pub as a woman walked past and donated some spare change into his pot, and picked up some coins he had not seen, and gave them to him. "Here you go," she said, smiling. "Thank you, miss," Clifford said, and smiled weakly. "You're welcome, have a good day." Clifford watched her walk away, and thought to himself that overall, it was a good day.